self-ownership for more than just your financial expression, for all of your expression is what we can make possible. And so I think it is a unique property of these systems that we can obscure the traits used to marginalize us.
Welcome to W3G, the official podcast for Myosin.xyz and your go-to hub to learn the latest developments in growth and marketing in the wild and wonderful world of Web3. I'm Julie Octaviano.
And I'm Blake Minaho Kim. Tune in each week as we talk to the best and brightest and keep uncovering insights so we can all grow together in the world of Web3.
Awesome. All right. Well, it's almost 10 after, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Welcome to Myosin's second Gather.Town event, Women Leading the Web3 Revolution. As the name alludes, this is a unique chance to hear from and highlight the women that are changing the game in Web3. And we don't want this to simply be about their gender and this industry, but to actually really dissect and highlight how women are generally impacting, shaping, and improving this crazy space we're in by bringing their own unique perspectives and strengths to the table. So with that said, we're going to kick things off with a panel discussion, followed by some Q&As from the audience. And then we'll leave the last 30-ish minutes or so for just some hangs and networking before we all get back to work, life, whatever it is that you're all doing today. Great. So today we have our three amazing panelists with us. Evin McMullen, CEO and co-founder of Disco.xyz. Nicole Davis, builder and co-creator of Seed Club, and Rachel Brissenden, Coalition Success Steward at Opolis. Ladies, thank you all so much for being a part of this event. Before we dive into all the questions, I'd like to start off by having each of you give our virtual / kind of our IRL audience some background about yourself and what you've been building in Web3. I guess let's just start with Evin, Nicole, and then we can do Rachel after.
Everybody. Thank you so much, Myosin House, for having me. It's wonderful to be here today with all of you. I'm Evin McMullen, and as mentioned, I'm the co-founder of Disco, an advisor to Boys Club, co-founder of Dow Jones, and overall DAO enthusiast. So at Disco, we are your identity for the metaverse. We extend the capabilities of your existing wallet keys and turn them into a data backpack so that you can own and control private data written about you and carry it with you from one app to another, across Web 2, across Web 3 blockchains into physical space and back. So we make it easy for organizations and communities to issue credentials of membership that allow their squads to access Google collaboration tools, chat channels like Telegram and Discord, Shopify discounts, gated smart contracts, gated events, content, and more. So really excited to announce that we have just rolled out a few of these integrations, just invited a broader set of people into our private beta. So if you're interested, check out our Twitter at Disco.xyz. We can welcome you to the dance floor. And also rolled out our Shopify Disco swag store yesterday. So you can buy our awesome swag with your reputation for $0. So anyway, really excited to talk about all of the developments that we have in the decentralized data stack. I'm really honored to be here with my co-panelists today.
Yeah, excited to be chatting with you all. And thank you again for having me. I'm Nicole. I'm a builder at Seed Club. Seed Club is amongst many things, the best place for builders to grow and launch their communities, their tokens. Really lucky to have gotten to work with Myosin and many others. We had our 5th accelerator cohort come through this past fall, and we've worked with over 60 projects, including Myosin, of course. Early majority was mentioned earlier, Cabin, Water and Music, Jump, Kraus House, just to name a few. So yeah, if there's DAOs out there, we love working with them. And we're also lucky that we get to partner and collaborate with many working in the DAO space. I came on to Seed Club through their second accelerator about 2 years ago, which is crazy. And previous to that, I'd worked at Berklee College of Music looking at blockchain, Evin was called that, to solve issues of music and musical artist compensation and to make compensation more accurate and efficient. So I've been looking at all of the different ways that crypto can be used for creators and for communities for a long time. And I'm really excited to continue to get to support builders as well now with at Seed Club. And we are actively looking for our next cohort and our next cruise of builders. So if you are thinking about a DAO, or if you have, launched a DAO and are in that process, we are open to conversations because it's never simple. There's always sort of new challenges and new questions and new innovations that cause you to wonder. So yeah, glad to be here. Thank you. Rachel?
Hi, everybody. So I want to start by just thanking Julie and everyone for presenting today. And I am interested to learn more about Seed Club. That sounds really interesting. And thank you, Julie, also for pronouncing my name right. It has been butchered a lot of times throughout my life, so I appreciate that. My name is Rachel. I'm a coalition success steward at Opolis. So essentially, I'm doing partnerships and building relationships in the Web3 community. So Opolis is a digital employment cooperative, and we're aiming to democratize employment through empowering the self-sovereign worker to get the benefits that they need, basically to work in Web3, to work on DAOs, to work as an independent worker and have all the benefits they would basically need at a corporate position while doing freelance work. And what this means is we set people up with their own LLC. We help them incorporate themselves as a business. We get them medical, dental, vision, access to 401k, retirement. We basically turn degens into solo entrepreneur professionals. And this is really great for people who are working in Web3, who have families who need benefits for whatever reason. Like our co-founder likes to say, benefits are the least important thing until they're the most important thing. So just giving workers that safety net of insurance, of coverage, saving for retirement, doing all the things that you would do at a regular position while being able to work and have the freedom and sovereignty to do what you love. We also help with tax compliance too, which is really big in the crypto space. A lot of people don't even know a lot of the times they're not being tax compliant with your earnings. So we just have to calculate on a federal and state level what you owe, and we ensure that you are completely compliant. As a worker, you're compliant with FLSA, labor laws, and basically just becoming like a solo entrepreneur professional. And I am always looking for impactful projects and DAOs to feature. Every week, I curate a space, Twitter space called Freelancer Friday. So I bring up different DAOs and projects and, just go through and ask them questions, bridge it to Opolis and talk about how we can collaborate. We're partnered with projects like CoinDAO, with Kernel, Wonderbird. We're partnered with Near as well. I just did a space with the co-founder of Near and some of the core team at Polygon. So we're partnered with a lot of big projects, and I'm always looking for new projects to partner with. So I'll go ahead and share our link to join as a coalition partner. And I'd love to learn more about these projects and collab with you guys.
Oh, sorry. I just realized I was on mute. That was amazing. Thank you, all three, for such in depth introductions. I love that you all come from completely different sides of the ecosystem. I guess some overlap, but overall, I like that there's some diversity here. So, yeah, without further ado, I guess let's just get into it. As always, I will start with a question. I don't want to call on anyone. So, whoever just, feels the need to jump in and answer first, we can just do it that way. So starting with the first one, Evin, Nicole, Rachel, whoever wants to jump in first, what inspired you guys to get involved in the Web3 space, and how do you see it impacting the future of Web2 products as we know them?
I'm happy to hop in and start. So I was really fortunate in that a little over 10 years ago when I was an undergrad, I was transfixed with free and open source software and Creative Commons licenses, like the legal wrappers we can use to make data more free. And it was around that time that the Arab Spring was happening. So we were starting to see censorship resistant peer-to-peer mesh networks popping up in places like Tunisia, where the internet had all but been turned off by the government. And so it was at that time that I had the world's greatest professor ever in the universe. This woman, Elizabeth Stark, was my computer science professor and introduced me to Bitcoin. She went on to found Lightning Labs and is a leader in the Bitcoin ecosystem now, but at the time was my super cool computer science professor. And so I feel very fortunate that a young woman helped me understand that the space was for me. So I never got the memo that this male dominated field was somehow going to be intimidating or unwelcoming, because it was introduced to me by someone who was a lot like me. And some of the first people that I met in the Web3 ecosystem were women and non-binary people. And now as an advisor to Boys Club, a global community of women and non-binary people, I try to continue that so that other folks can encounter Web3 in the same welcoming way that I did.
I love that story. And yeah, I love listening to you speak about your journey, Evin. I've listened to you on a few other pods, and it's just always inspiring. I think that the principles of autonomy and sovereignty over whether it's your career or your identity were also, I think, really key for me. Like I said, my career has always sort of been about supporting young people, supporting artists, supporting creators to have sovereignty over their career, over the work that they do. And, similarly was lucky enough to sort of just be exposed to blockchain as a potential tool for doing this. And, at the time it was really about like digital rights management, which is kind of funny to think about now. But I think that like what really sort of captured me was just understanding sort of the power of disintermediation generally, that we can take these platforms that have typically stood in the way of all of the systems that we're a part of and that you can take that out and create directly with whoever it is that you want to work with. And so, fast forward that to now, I mentioned that I came through the Seed Club Accelerator. I was on the board of Ampled, which was founded by Austin Roby, who's now with Meta Label. And Austin asked me, do you want to come through this accelerator with me? And I said, sure. And that was my first introduction into really the more sort of like, current social token and then, NFTs and DAOs. But yeah, I think that having the arts as this sort of entry point has grounded me in this feeling that, the platforms are great for distribution. And they, I think, showed us things that are wonderful and that can happen. But at the end of the day, they're just really not serving us the way that we want to be served. Yeah, makes perfect sense. Cool. Rachel, did you want to chime in? If not, I'll jump in.
Yeah. So I guess what took me from my 9 to 5 job into Web3, going from my Web2 to Web3 job, I would really have to say it was ETH Denver. I feel like ETH Denver really changed my life. It is an event that really impacted me as an individual. So I was working in a 9 to 5 as basically a senior account manager for this company in the credit industry. And I was really starting to feel like energetically, it wasn't aligned with me and my higher purpose. And the more and more I started to learn about DAOs, I started to learn about crypto. I was just waiting for 5 o'clock to come to get off of my job and do crypto things and work on DAOs. So I started hosting meetups in Southern California, and I did this thing called Crypto Cafe. And I just started a meetup page and just liked to gather with like-minded individuals. And I really grew passionate about that. And I started to just look forward to that every day and not want to do my job pretty much. Then I hear about ETH Denver and I applied for a scholarship with her. And then I find out, like, I wrote this long essay on why I wanted to go to ETH Denver, what I wanted to contribute to the Web3 ecosystem. And I ended up getting approved. So I got a full scholarship to go to ETH Denver. And I got asked to publicly speak about DAOs at like a mini DAO conference called DAO Denver, which I'm helping to organize this year as well. So it was really exciting. It was just like all of a sudden, like I went to ETH Denver and it felt like I really had a voice and I was in a community where I felt more valued. And energetically, I just feel like working in a 9 to 5 in like a hierarchical, paternalistic employment structure, it just wasn't feeling aligned with who I am as an individual. And I feel like DAOs are a way to empower individuals to have self-sovereignty over their employment and to do what they love, right? Without anyone telling them who to be, where to be, when to be. It's just up to you, right? It's autonomous. So that really started to make more and more sense to me. So I started talking about DAOs. I haven't stopped talking about DAOs since then. I got hired to do business development for layer 1 protocol. And ever since then, I've just been, really involved in the space. I like doing public speaking engagements, calls like these, and learning about different DAOs and projects. And basically human connection, I would say, is the one thing that keeps me showing up that I really love here.
As Myosin being a DAO, yeah, I agree with all of that. And then going back to kind of the tech side of things, Nicole and Evan, I know you're kind of mentioned this. How do you guys see like blockchain technology being used to promote financial inclusion and access to financial services for women specifically, but also, I guess, for any minority group? Like, how do you see this unfolding? I mean, it already started, but I would love to get your guys' take on that.
So I think in Web3, we talk a lot about the promise of banking the unbanked and creating a more inclusive financial system. And we can't do any of that until we know who is sitting behind a given set of keys. And so fortunately for us, we are now, in sort of the Web3 technology stack, embracing an identity layer that will allow us to do just that. So, with the advent of new technologies like decentralized identifiers and verifiable credentials, we can have things like KYC credentials, proof of residency, proof of compliance with sanctions, so that we can take advantage of the unique capabilities of, public ledgers where we can generate keys that can hold capital without having to ask anyone for permission. And so I think that's really the sort of the core part of our inclusion narrative here is that, blockchains like Ethereum, like Bitcoin do not require permission from a central intermediary to generate an identity that can hold capital and transact. And so in order for us to really scale that out in an inclusive way, we need to ensure that we can comply, with the existing society and environment and economic structures that already exist. And so that means, focusing on things like on ramps and off ramps, the ability to receive payment in crypto. So, amazing teams like Rachel's are leading the way to allow freelancers and contributors to, earn a living in a way that works with their schedule and their lifestyle. So, for example, a lot of young parents, moms who are at home or maybe rejoining the workforce can have the opportunity to participate in a DAO in a more flexible manner than you might otherwise. But of course, it's those payment rails and the ability to receive those funds and use them and make this, actually worthwhile and more than just a thought experiment.
Go, go. I was going to say, Rachel, I'll let you go. I see you raised your hand. There's also the education aspect to it, right? Like, I mean, I know, you know, my own group of friends and just as you can see from just looking at the demographics of this industry, I don't think women are not gravitating towards certain parts of the ecosystem for whatever reason, but it's also the onus is on us to educate them and so that they can access these services as well and educate the general public. But I feel like that's a huge gap too, is like, you know, allowing there to be resources and have those resources flow in a way that can really get us to mainstream adoption to these, these ramps that you speak of. But anyways, go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, so two things that came to mind that I was formulating thoughts while Evan was speaking. Basically, we're talking about payment to people in the industry, and I'd say payroll is really important. And one thing that we do at Opolis is help people to basically get crypto-friendly payroll. And also, I believe Opolis has worked with the governor of Colorado too to make progress there, and people are now legally allowed to pay their taxes in crypto in the state of Colorado. So we're making a lot of progress there. And as far as payroll goes, like when members sign up for Opolis, they essentially have this member dashboard and they need to pay themselves essentially minimum wage in whatever their state of residence is. And they also have the option, if they're making at least minimum wage in fiat currency, to pay themselves in crypto too. But basically, there's the Fair Labor and Standards Act, which says that you have to make at least minimum wage. And it basically protects workers and makes sure that they're making fair wages and they're not paid in commodity. Basically, I think one of our founding stewards likes to say it protects farmers from getting paid like in hamburgers. I think that's something it says in FLSA as an example. But yeah, so once you make at least minimum wage, you can pay yourself in crypto, which is one thing that I really love because we're gearing more towards mainstream adoption when we integrate these things, right? When we're compliant with like, say taxes and labor laws, it's just like another step further towards legitimizing employment in this space, and payroll is a part of that. Another thing I was thinking while Evan was speaking is that I really love Boys Club and I've been wanting to learn more about it. I actually heard from my friend Layla, who is part of the East Denver community, about Boys Club, and I've heard really good things. So we are actually doing, and I just want to invite you all because we have a Telegram chat going. We are doing a women's spa day this year at East Denver. So the first day I've organized like a really badass group of women. And the first day when we get there, we're going to a salt cave and we're just doing a spa day. And I'm letting Layla like take us to all the cool spa spots. So yeah, I'd like to invite all the women here. If you're interested in joining this Telegram group, I'll drop the link. And yeah, also we're doing a meetup. So on the 25th as well, we're doing a meetup with Metagamma Delta DAO, whose mission is really aligned with Boys Club, I think. It's just like onboarding more women into Web3 and just making a more inclusive space for both men and women. Yeah, that's all I'd share.
Thank you. Nicole, did you want to jump in? Yeah, I mean, I think as far as sort of financial access and, just understanding the benefits of coming into Web3, the other piece is that it's unlocked opportunities for, basically pooling capital toward any goal or any collective idea. And that I think like ultimately is kind of this like major unlock with DAOs that we haven't really been able to do on our own before. And so once you're able to do that and once you're able to, pool capital, work with the other people who've done that, and then actually decide what you want to do with that, use, governance, et cetera, to make decisions. I think that has unlocked for a lot of women just seeing themselves as somebody who can interact that way and who could be, I think it like takes away sort of this scary barrier of financial investment or seeing yourself as like a financial actor, and has introduced a lot of people into this other world. I think it also, on the other side, I think that it's also sort of challenging a lot of the ideas that we have about finances. And so it's kind of been this like interesting give and take where it's both brought people into this world and not just women, but really people who, again, generally, whether it's like artists or other, disenfranchised minorities who haven't seen themselves as people who could be actors in a space with, pooling capital and again, directing it towards a goal, growing those resources and sharing the benefits with the others that you're creating with. And so I think like generally it's just expanded the conversation to include people who often haven't seen themselves as financial actors or seen that industry as an industry where they can be welcome. And I think like lastly, because often culture or, consumer products or, other types of communities are the entry point, I think it also just makes it a bit more accessible because you're coming in not simply because of the financial aspect, although that's often a piece of, the education and the literacy, because there's so much adjacency to, the work that is happening there. And so you might come in because you're interested in the culture, you're interested in the topic, but I think quickly it becomes something where then you get turned on to whether it's, DeFi or as Evan mentioned, banking the unbanked, and you start to see all these other applications and it's a much easier way to onboard. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that is what has made boys clubs so successful is it's attracting, everyday women, whatever you want to call that, into it's the cultural aspect, it's a hub for us to all kind of be around like-minded people, a no bro zone, the whole thing with boys club. But then once you're in there, they really break down, as I was mentioning before, the educational aspect, like something that I probably would have never took it upon myself to go and educate myself on, if I'm being completely honest, but the culture and the community that they have created and not like MyBiff, all the big women-led communities have created, I feel like that's like such a great entry point for people to go in for the culture, for the community, as I mentioned. But then, as Nicole, you were saying, slowly but surely you start to self-educate on all the aspects around the ecosystem, most, importantly for day to day is the financial stuff and the blockchain technology that's empowering that on the back end. So yeah, totally agree there. Speaking, staying true to the theme here, as women, we all come with our own unique perspectives and strengths. With that said, how has that come into play when working in a currently male dominated industry? In other words, like what have been some of the challenges and some of the benefits of being a woman working in Web3 tech specifically?
So with Disco, we are a women-led organization. We have a significant number of people who do not identify as male on our team. And I think that's a design hedge. For our purposes, like the products that we build, especially our web app, are intended to be accessible to people of all identities. And so we think that the greater diversity of perspectives that we're able to collect both through our research and the hands that are putting together that research, the insights, our backlog, producing the product, testing it, launching it, and introducing it to partners. If that selection of people doing that work reflects the diversity of folks we hope to serve, we think we have a better chance at being able to build accessible experiences that appeal to that broad variety of folks instead of just those who are already in Web3, already representing that majority.
Yeah, I think accessibility and, drawing on concepts, for example, of universal design, having a diverse design team and a diverse team, from the get-go is key. Nikita Bier, has been in the sort of Twitter sphere a good bit, a bunch of people have been following Gas App's acquisition by Discord. And he tweeted something around how they had an accessible feature so that the app was more mobile friendly for various uses. And immediately they saw an uptick in usage. And I think it's these assumptions that like, oh, well, if we like play to this minority, not that women are a minority, but if we play to like, this identity or that identity, it's going to feel too niche or it's going to not necessarily benefit our like greater purpose. And I think like ultimately what you see is that there's just like massive unlocks from having a more diverse perspective. I think that the other piece that, I think is both like a challenge and a benefit is that, as women, we are so often sort of cultured to assume that our experience is not the right experience or our experience is, if you're experiencing something, it's really just about you. It's not something that could necessarily apply to other people. And so, I think that, again, it's kind of this challenge and a benefit. It's a challenge to overcome that imposter syndrome to basically say, I'm not understanding this, and there might be other people that are also not understanding this, or like I'm experiencing this in this certain way, or this doesn't necessarily jive with me. And, what if we were to approach it in a different way? And often, because we've had an experience that is not necessarily parallel to the dominant, designers and developers in this industry, we assume that it's really just ours. When you can flip that and sort of like overcome that or like put yourself out there, I think that what we see is actually that like that's often helpful feedback. And, it's something that's very valuable. But again, it's so challenging to do that. And I think, we can all point to women that have made space for us and that have, championed us. And I think that that's the other piece is being in a space where there are people that look and feel and can relate to your experience is so critical. And what I love, and I joked about this, I listen to the Boys Club podcast is one of the main ones that I'll listen to with my kids around. And there's a lot of others that are kind of just a little bit too like boring, but Boys Club keeps it like, hip and fresh enough. And because of that, my children don't really understand that crypto is not this like women first industry, which I totally love.
I love that. We're just shilling Boys Club up and down during the panel. Well deserved. Rachel, did you want to chime in?
That's so awesome, Nicole. And I really want to listen to the Boys Club podcast. Sounds awesome.
You should.
So some of the, I guess, strengths, like, I don't know. For me, being a woman in this space, I feel like it's actually something that's celebrated now, like because we're acutely aware of the imbalance in the male to female ratio. So for me, I don't think it's been an inhibiting factor for me at all. I think if anything, it's increased my drive to want to succeed, in a male dominated industry. I feel like it's only, it increased my drive and wanting to succeed and make more of an impact. And also it's created like this energetic thing, like, when you're working to overcome something with a group of people, like how women are working to overcome the imbalance ratio of men to women in the space, there's sort of this energy of connection that's kind of like deep rooted in the plight for change. And I think I feel that with Metagamma Delta DAO. And I've been hearing that Boys Club is a really great group to be a part of. Like my friend Leela was telling me all about it recently. And there's just kind of like this deeper connection that you have as a group when there's something to overcome, I think. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. I think for women in the space too, like, I'll just say this. I think women really need to prioritize self-care. And this is just for everyone, but women especially. It's so easy to get burnt out and forget to take time for yourself. Like, we're working our asses off, trying to build a space here that's inclusive. And it's important to take that time for self-care. I think it's even more vital for women.
Yeah. Well, we're juggling it all. It's the big thing. I mean, Nicole has children. We have, our families, our work, our
Create humans. Like,
yeah, we create and raise humans. Yes. Yeah. Going back to the product side, I'm just curious. I don't know if this is more applicable to, maybe Evin, or I guess it could be applicable to all of you guys in a different sense, but are any of you guys seeing any specific trends with the types of Web3 products that female consumers are adopting versus male consumers? And why? And if so, why do you think that is? Well, I definitely think that things that do stuff appeal to more people, right? So, we are now in the age of utility because Ponzi games and, high risk casinos that require a lot of technical literacy are inherently exclusionary in terms of the parties that they appeal to. And so I think, now we have reached the ceiling of fun and utility that we can coordinate around group chats with bank accounts, casinos, and OpenSea collection management, which are the fun 3 games that we can play on chain right now. But I think that especially as we start to see more folks in product roles, design roles, management roles who are coming over from a Web 2 context, we're seeing greater diversity of expertise. And therefore, that gives us the skill sets required to build assets with utility.
Yeah, I mean, I think that also, the bear has been this little, moment that we're in has been a good reminder to return to some of the key factors of business generally. And so, revenue, finding product market fit, these are all incredibly important. They're things that we're working really closely with our projects on of, how do you survive and stay sustainable and then go into the next cycle as strong as possible. And so I think that there is kind of this focus all of a sudden on, okay, you know, what are we actually creating and how can we make this something that people want and want to be a part of? And so we're definitely seeing just a transition into looking at our communities as this sort of consumer experience and understanding that people want to come in and still, be entertained and be a part of something that they're helping build. And so we are actually seeing, actual physical goods. So last night I was at a trunk show for Early Majority. They make the coolest gear, founded by a super badass woman who's been in the apparel industry, has been in the music industry. She's a rock star herself. And, at the bottom, the sort of the bottom line is that the gear is excellent. It's so dope. It's so beautiful. It's so well made. It's ethical, ethically sourced, et cetera. And so I think that, the ability for people to have these ideas and put them out into the market, gain traction, and then build with community is really exciting. But you do need to have that product market fit, and you still need to stay incredibly close to your consumer. It enables you to do it in a new way. So yeah, we've been really excited to work with some of the projects Made with Love as well that has come through our accelerator and is looking at apparel and other products in new ways. I think the other piece that I'll say is that and I think, again, you see this in a lot of other sort of women-led or women-friendly communities, is that there's like a playfulness and a willingness to kind of be ourselves, I think, which gives the experience a different feel. And so not having to necessarily put on a front or, be somebody that you're not, but rather, sort of truly be yourself and be authentic, and to have experiences and products that reflect that, I think has been really refreshing. And I think that like truly the diversity that we've seen in Web3 versus Web2 is, my hope, I already see it, but my hope is that we continue to see that reflected in the products that come out of this internet that we're building.
I have to agree with Nicole on some of the things she was saying. I really do sense that women in the space have more of a proclivity towards human connection and community. And there is a bit of playfulness in that, right? As far as products that I see women using more, I would say I've seen a lot of women I know in the space really into like NFTs and the metaverse and doing things that have some sort of fun or playfulness to them, For me, I've also connected with quite a few women that enjoy public speaking, that enjoy going to events and conferences and like doing things in person. I feel like the human connection part of it for women, from what I've seen, is really important. So the playfulness and community, I feel like, is what I see a lot of women striving for here.
Yeah, that I agree with all of that. And it can only continue to get better and more inclusive as we go on. I definitely think there's more inclusion in Web3 than in Web2, but I will say from my point of view, there's still definitely a little, Rachel, as you were saying, I think there's still a gap that we need to actively work on overcoming, and going back to the culture and the community. I think there's a lot of spaces for that could kind of help, fill that gap. With that said, how do you see, this is a very like high level, broad question. So, start wherever you may, but for each of you, I guess, how do you guys see the Web3 industry evolving in the future? And I was going to ask, what impact do you think this will have in women in the space? But I'm curious about deeper than that. What impact do you think that will have across any, I don't want to say minority group, segmented group. I don't think women are a minority group, but what impact do you think that'll have on various subgroups that are currently dabbling in the space right now? I think that it will turn decentralized technologies from a fetish object into an everyday utility. When you think about the early internet, it was used for pretty, esoteric and experimental things for a long time before AOL and CompuServe and, affordable hardware turned computers and internet access into something that showed up in nearly every home in America. And so I think the broadening of our tool sets, of the communities and educational information application layer that make up the Web3 ecosystem will hopefully, change this conversation from one about protocols to one about human experiences that just happen to be enabled by protocols. Indeed, we're having a wonderful conversation here today, and no one has mentioned TCP/IP or HTTPS. So, we know that we can do activities with one another in coordination without talking about the underlying protocol. We just haven't built up enough of a stack to get there yet.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is going to fade to the background I my hope is that what doesn't necessarily fade to the background is some of the principles and the ethos. And so, my daughter, 12, she's discovering, I mean, she's discovered social media. We're discovering it together, trying to navigate that like crazy beat and figure out what are the safest and coolest and the hippest, but also safe ways for her to, be present on social media and to share her own work. And more than anything, she wants to share and she wants to connect and she wants to learn from others. And so, my hope is that eventually she's going to do that in places and with technologies that are much more accessible and safe for individuals. Because, for me as a parent, obviously, I want her to have that freedom and autonomy, but I also want to make sure that she's making good decisions at a time when she's not necessarily able to do that. And so I think that what we expect of technology, and I hope what her generation is going to expect from technology, is going to be much different than what we've come to expect. Because, once you make that account on TikTok, you don't necessarily know where the information is going. You don't know who's in control of your identity, and the content is no longer yours. And these are conversations that I try to have with her. Sometimes she's interested, usually she's not. So I think that, again, my hope more than ever is that what we expect of the technology that we're creating now is going to be different. But, at the same time, with the protocols and the technical aspects that can feel inaccessible to many people, myself included, that is going to fade to the background.
I think Cole and Evan made so many good points. How I think that this technology will affect just humans in a broader sense. I think this is going to completely change how financial institutions operate. I think it's already disrupting, like, not only financial institutions, but employment structures, how people work. And, I was talking to my partner yesterday and he was saying how, like, I think it's going to be a while for DAOs to really change things. Like, there's a lot of things that we need to work out as a space. And I really hope at least it gives another option for people who aren't vibing with the current employment structure, with the current hierarchical organizational structure that we've grown accustomed to societally. So I think that this will change institutions. This will change how communities collaborate with one another. It gives us a kind of like a higher purpose. Like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Ikigai, like the Japanese philosophy for finding your life's purpose. Like, for me, Web3 has intersected. It's kind of like there's a diagram for Ikigai. It shows like, what are you passionate about? What do you love? What does the world need? And what can you get paid for? And I'm like, Web3 intersects all of that for me. Like, I feel like I found my life's purpose and like I'm a part of something so much greater than myself that has the potential to help a lot of people. And one of the first things, like aside from the community that drew me in, was learning about universal basic income. Back at my first job doing BD for Layer 1 protocol, they were going to countries like Colombia. They were going to all of these like third world countries and trying to help people and educate them about cryptocurrencies. They were going to like these favelas and like educating children. And I just think equal opportunity and like at least giving these communities a chance to learn about cryptocurrencies. Like, I know Axie Infinity got really big in the Philippines. I think that's so awesome to create a global public utility that can really help people and offer universal basic income. So I can go on and on about how I think this will continue changing the world, but I think those are the main things, and at the project that I'm at specifically, what I'm seeing is people feeling empowered to be their own bosses. And I think that's so cool, right? Like being in charge of your own employment, of your energy and doing what you love. I think Web3 will provide a space for that for individuals.
We got so many amazing answers. Thank you guys so much. We have a few minutes left, so I do want to wrap up with just a couple questions, and then I want to leave some time for the audience to chime in if they have any questions for either of you. One of the questions I was actually most curious about is what kind of resources, and feel free to draw on your own personal experiences for when you guys, each of you were coming into the space, but what sort of resources and or support systems would you say are available? I want to say for women specifically, but honestly for anyone looking to enter the Web3 industry. I know for me, I really went hard on podcasts. As I mentioned, Boys Club was one of the biggest entries, Web3 Daily newsletter, which, one of the writers is in Myosin. But yeah, I would say Boys Club, emotional support, Web3 Daily and podcast, educational support. But yeah, I would love to hear what kind of, resources you guys would recommend for people wanting to enter the space and I guess women specifically as well.
I mean, when I first started educating myself about cryptos back in like 2016, 17. And I, went into the podcast app and I searched blockchain podcast or whatever. And Laura Shin's was the only one that existed at that time. And I think what's so cool about, her specifically is like she really was in my, from my knowledge, pretty much one of the first people doing a podcast about blockchain. I started listening right kind of when the DAO hack happened and my mind was just blown. I was trying to understand so many things. And what I really appreciate about her approach is that she asks questions that, perhaps to a more advanced experienced person sound dumb, but from my perspective, were so interesting. And she continues to go at it in that way where, she asks questions and sometimes kind of gets like trolled or criticized a little bit for asking these really basic questions. But again, kind of to my point earlier, when you ask those basic questions, it often sort of peels back this like, this like veneer of, oh, it's actually, that like simply like something doesn't work or somebody was not necessarily telling the truth. And I think we've seen this over and over and over again. And so she has just been fearless and has been one of my greatest educators. I'll definitely shill our Building at the Edges Seed Club podcast. It's, I think, one of the best ways to get an understanding of the corner of crypto that we're building in and how we're looking at the intersection between commerce and consumer goods and community and culture. And so please check out our podcast as well. And then I think finally, the IRL experiences are a great place. So I think once you feel sort of the Web3 ethos in person and being able to do that. And I think fortunately there's more and more places around the world where you can experience that. I think it's often one of the best ways to get onboarded and to find your people. And I think that, lastly, what's great right now about Web3 is that there really are all of these niches. And so whatever it is that you're into, there truly are communities out there. There's communities for builders coming together more generally, Seed Club being one of them. But then there's also these places for, whatever, sort of sector of culture you're interested in, you can find your people.
Awesome. It's really exciting to hear about all these different projects. And Laura Shin is really awesome. The book Cryptopians is a really good playbook of like the struggles, getting a cryptocurrency project off the ground. So a couple different projects I'm going to recommend just as a starting point for people looking to get involved in DAOs or just Web3. Meta Gamma Delta, I'm going to say this is a great place for women to start. It's just an inclusive DAO for onboarding more women into Web3. They have a grants program and they fund different women-led projects. So if you're a woman looking to get more involved in the space and join a DAO, it's open. We do calls every Friday. We have our office hours and we also do our speaker series where we have different women leaders in the space, kind of like this, come up and speak. It was once a week, but I'm not sure if we're continuing it at the moment. Another place, I'm going to recommend Bankless DAO. It's kind of weird for me. I'm now a contributor on Bankless DAO doing DAO relationships, basically like DAO partnerships. A lot of people say Bankless or Bankless DAO is where they started. For me, it's where I ended up because I kept hearing everyone talking about this and, helping to put together DAO Denver this year. ETH Denver, Bankless DAO was a major sponsor last year. So I kept hearing more and more about it. I ended up joining the weekly calls and there's just something for everyone. If you want to get involved at Bankless DAO, there's like a research guild, a writers guild. If you're into DAOs, go to DAO relationships. That's where I am. And there's just so many opportunities for people to get involved. There's like the editor writing guild where basically you help to curate content, like see the writing and editing process of like articles and different campaigns. So yeah, I would say Meta Gamma Delta DAO for women, Bankless DAO if you're just starting out. If you're already like well into the space and already earning your crypto, running your own business, reach out to me if you want to join the Opolis community. And as a matter of fact, I'll share our GM chat if you guys want to join on Telegram. Every morning, we just drop different like events going on, alpha. And I failed to mention the founder of Opolis is also one of the founders of ETH Denver as well. So there's a lot of crossover. One of our ambassadors is the founder of Buffalicorn Ventures. You guys are familiar with the Buffalicorn. And then we have another ambassador that's also a Bit a Week steward. So if you are interested in getting more involved in the Opolis or ETH Denver communities, this chat would be perfect. So I'll share that.
Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, look, I also put the Seed Club podcast. Rachel, you're putting in your resources in here, and then I just dropped the Seed Club podcast in the chat for everyone. who is interested in everything just mentioned, feel free to refer to the chat. Evin, did you want to chime in? Any resources you wanted to shill as kind of like your go-to or anything you recommend to newcomers in the space?
Yeah, absolutely. Boysclub.vap is where you can check out Boys Club. I also highly recommend the School of Block series of videos on YouTube from Ledger, produced by Robin, formerly of The Defiant. And if you're interested in decentralized identity, Disco.mirror.xyz has a series of explainer blog posts that help to make these concepts a little bit more accessible and help to walk us through the primitives of decentralized identifiers and verifiable credentials. And also in terms of podcasts, I definitely want to encourage everyone to check out the Boys Club podcast, as mentioned as well. My personal favorite is Bankless. Every Friday, I listen to the weekly roll up, and that really helps me stay abreast of what's happening in the industry.
Perfect. Cool. I think that pretty much wraps up the panel discussion. Before we open it up to the audience to ask any questions they may have, I know you guys probably, I think at some point already showed your projects, but just as another recap, please let everyone know here where we can find each of you, where we can find what you're working on. Have at it. Yep, I think that my Twitter was shared earlier. We are Seed Club HQ on Twitter, seedclub.xyz on the interwebs, and you can find us pretty much everywhere. So yeah, if you are building, if you are aspirational, regardless, please find us. Yeah, we're on the internet.
That's crazy. I've actually shared one of these podcasts. You guys did a podcast with Kevin Iwaki with Bitcoin DAO. Okay. I'm familiar with it. I've listened to this. Sure. Awesome. What is internet? Says Douch.
There's a pretty famous YouTube clip of, I think, like the Today Show anchor people.
Yeah.
It's hilarious.
Evin, you wanna? I'm gonna drop the Disco because I'm gonna drop the FAQ section of Disco.xyz. But Evin, I think you're proven authority on Twitter as well, right? I don't want to speak.
Yes, I am. I'm at Proven Authority, and we are at Disco.xyz on Twitter.
Perfect. And then, Rachel, where can we find you, Opolis, all things you're working on?
So I'm going to drop a link tree right now. So this will give you access to just the landing page, a quick blurb about Opolis. That's the first option you can do. The second one will be if you want to schedule a call with me. I honestly, if you grab time on my calendar, I show up to every call people schedule with me. I love to connect with different people in the space and brainstorm ways we can collaborate. I'll probably end up like talking to you on like a podcast or a video or, some sort of Twitter space if you're interested. Also my Twitter, our Opolis French chat, the Opolis Discord, and my LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with me on all the things, you guys.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I'm also dropping the YouTube School of Block that Evin mentioned because I want to check that out myself. Okay, cool. I think that wraps up our Q&A. Wanted to open it up to the audience. If anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself right now and ask away.
It's Simon. Thank you so much for the conversation. As a non-woman, this was incredibly insightful. Like half the things that you guys were talking about, I was like, oh, this is a new idea. Did not realize that. So thank you for making me a little less ignorant. My question is really about two questions for you. It seems to me that Nicole, Rachel, and Evin, you've all focused on areas that not only you're good at, but also that you're passionate about. And as a result of being a woman in the space, there's like clear implication and problems that you're solving. But given the fact that crypto is a global community, there's a lot of people working in crypto in very suppressive social environments like India, Iran, and parts of Africa, I'm sure. So I'm wondering, are there any organizations that aim to tackle, I guess, societal problems through the lens of Web3? For example, with Opolis, it's about unlocking self-sovereign work, but how effective is that in a place like India, for instance? And kind of like solutions against that?
That's a really great question. So when it comes to different jurisdictions with different areas around the world, there's different goals when it comes to the labor force, like how people work. So it's actually a bit more challenging than you'd think to expand something like this. Some exciting news. We actually just launched in Canada 18 days ago. So on January 1st, we started servicing Canadians. So when it comes to expanding internationally, there's just different jurisdictions, there's different labor laws. And basically, if we feel or if we hear that enough people, if there's enough of a demand for it, we work with our legal counsel to figure out like what are the next steps for us to get more involved in that country. And I'd say like just a little alpha, like what I've been hearing the most is a lot of people from Nigeria and a lot of people from Portugal. I think there are certain areas where crypto tax laws are a bit more lenient, and I've seen like an influx of people going to those areas. Like, I went to Lisbon for NearCon, and it seemed like a lot of people are starting to move there just because they are more lenient with their tax laws. So I feel like there's a need for this definitely over there. And like, I did a bounty on Near Protocol, and like so many people from Nigeria came through saying they need the service. So those are the two places, in my opinion. We are working with someone who has a lot of connections in different Latin American countries to try and expand there. But for now, we are servicing the United States and Canada. And I would love to make this a global public utility to help individuals. Like, it's just the most empowering feeling to be your own boss, right? To be in charge of your own employment, to do what you love and not have to worry about the red tape stuff. And another thing I'll just mention is like the benefits. Like a lot of us are degenning out, and like, God forbid there's ever a medical emergency. Like I said, our co-founder likes to say benefits are the least important thing until they're the most important thing. And a lot of people end up saving versus the state exchanges that they would be on. So Opolis has given me really great coverage. I have, retirement plan options, 401k, like it makes you feel more like your employment is legitimized. Like you can degen out and also, have a retirement plan and have pay stubs and go get an apartment or a house, like the basic human things that you need. So yeah, I'll end my passionate rant there.
I think one of the unique challenges and opportunities that we have coming from a Western perspective is to invite challenges to what we assume about these other communities. One of the responsibilities that we have as builders is to be mindful of the bias that we introduce into the products that we create and how that may inherently limit others' ability to access them. For example, one of the stewards of one of the largest identity related projects in Web3 does not believe that more than half of the planet has a valid identity. And so, it's really important for us to be mindful of the ways that our individual choices and biases may prohibit these tools from being accessible in other communities. Further, we have awkward stepping around things like, so we know our friends at Gitcoin have run into challenges translating their documentation where merely the presentation of information about decentralized systems can be perceived as political weaponry. And so I think, starting off by proving out tools in the places where they are most likely to deliver value, and then sorting out how to iterate and evolve them for other communities is one of the best ways that we can hope to reach those outside of our orbit. So, develop excellence at home and then listen and learn and endeavor to scale in a way that is mindful of the audiences that we're bringing this technology to and respectful of the place where they're coming from.
And I think also, again, the fact that, not every single transaction needs to feel fully financial in nature. And so I think that that's also, in some cases, making it easier or more accessible for people to come online and, to look at something that they might be interested in. So Swaraj was one of our projects in our last cohort. They were our first project of entrepreneurs building in India. They were online for our sessions at like 10 or 11 or, midnight, which is obviously not super accessible time wise, but, they're building something that's music focused and they have a ton of Indian artists involved, for example. And so I think, we're seeing sort of a move toward that it's not only sort of the transactional or financial systems, but then also the experiences and the consumer facing products that are being built. And so I think that that's also just, like we were saying earlier, as the protocols and as the tech sort of fades to the back, it's something that feels much more accessible because it feels much more familiar. It's just, it's an internet experience that somebody would be a part of. I want to just quickly interject and just, if you haven't been already, just make sure to check out the chat that's happening on the bottom right hand or right hand side of your screen. I poke fun at Simon with the Britney Spears reference joke. And then there's a lot of talk about what's going on in the Web3 community in India, specifically with women and, the things that are changing socially with how empowered they feel. And then there's even an app that was mentioned, Kodo.world or Kodo app on Twitter. So yeah, make sure to check out the chat unfolding in real time. Anyone else have any questions, any follow-up questions to that, or just any other questions for our panelists?
Yeah, I do for Evan. Hello,
GM,
hello.
GM. What's
Morning.
good? What's good?
All right. Yeah, everything is fine. We are building in the winter. Yeah, my question is where do you feel like the decentralized identities are most crucial, both in short and long term?
I think in the short term, it is most crucial for us to serve the folks who are already managing their own keys because they are the lowest hanging fruit, the easiest to reach, the ones who are experiencing friction that can be alleviated with these technologies immediately. So if we can't, operationalize them at home for the folks who care most about these problems, we cannot hope to scale them, to have the privilege to scale them to communities where, this technology is not even a point of discussion. And I think that in terms of inclusion, where we can generate identities and reputation without needing to ask anyone for permission, I think that is really the long tail horizon for decentralized identity. I think a future where we never have to stand in a line again, never have to fill out a form again, can immediately discover the products, services, content, and experiences that we want, as well as other people. When we push everything to the edges, we become these self sovereign beings managing our own keys. Discoverability becomes a huge problem, and as well as learning about one another so that we can play more interesting coordination games than pooling capital. And we can leverage our skills. We can weight governance by our expertise and contributions, and we can recognize people's non-financial participation in our communities. So I think DAO ecosystem first, no longer filling out forms ever again later.
Too accurate. Thank you.
I have another question for the panelists. If no, I don't want to steal the thunder here, but yeah, let's talk about identities. I've kind of purposefully, at least for me, like it's not a male or female pseudonym that I have, and obviously I'm pseudonymous, so you can eventually figure out who I am. But I think for more, I guess this for the sake of this conversation, do anon identities help or kind of hurt the effort for women to be more visible in Web3?
Oh, pro Anon, always. I think that the ability to selectively decide which parts of yourself to share in any given situation is a core tenet of Web3. Nicole was talking earlier about the core principles and philosophies that underpin these technologies and self custody. So, self ownership for more than just your financial expression, for all of your expression is what we can make possible. And so, I think it is a unique property of these systems that we can obscure the traits used to marginalize us. We do not inherently need to disclose our gender when we transact financially on chain as we might need to in other contexts. So that's why I think it's also really important for us to contemplate the consequences of putting data on chain. So, for example, a lot of folks are excited about things like soul-bound tokens, putting diplomas in them. But if, for example, if I receive a diploma from Bennett College in the United States, that's a historically Black women's university. That's going to mark my wallet with both my gender and likely my age, my discipline, my region, my race. And so minimum disclosure, I think, is the exciting future that we can look forward to in a Web3 enabled society where our data is on a need to know basis and only the information required for a transaction is going to be disclosed, as opposed to, making our data available to everyone on earth and in space with an internet connection for all time, which is more public than putting it on a billboard in Times Square, which is what we do when we publish data on chain.
I feel like that was the best synopsis of anonymity I'd ever heard. And I wish I wrote all that down. I'm glad we're recording that. I would love to just see that transcript. That was perfect.
I will push back a little bit. This is something where I kind of want to have my cake and eat it too, because I think that, yeah, 100% agree. Huge fan of data sovereignty and autonomy there. I think the other piece though that's tricky is that I often sort of see the argument of, well, you have a pseudonym. And so it likens in a lot of ways, I think sometimes the argument of oh, well, I don't see color. You could be purple, you could be green. And so I think that it is incredibly important to show up as women when we feel comfortable and when we can. And this goes, I think, for any minority, you can't be what you can't see. And so I reserve the right to both want to be able to be private when I want to, but then also sort of challenge that. I've often seen, oh, well, pseudonymity means that you don't necessarily know which gender you're working with. And so now gender doesn't matter. And I think that's the part where I sort of tend to push back a little bit, because we know that the minute that we're transacting IRL, gender does matter. And so I think that, we do want to have our cake and eat it too. We want to be able to have control over our data and over our identity. but at the same time expect that when we do show up fully, authentically as ourselves, we want to be obviously treated equally and, the same way as any individual. And so I think that, yeah, it's this tricky thing where it does definitely give us power. And we've seen that when you take identity, out of like resumes and stuff like that, that hiring looks a lot different. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean that once we're actually transacting IRL or once our identity becomes known that people don't feel necessarily different about us.
You brought up a lot of good points there, Nicole. So that actually got me thinking about some instances where I do feel like identity is powerful. I would say when it comes to a project, right? Like what most people want to see is the team behind it. And I think one of the only instances where I'm like, I'd rather know who the person is where it's a project where the masses are like investing their funds, right? Or if a large group of individuals are investing in. I feel like knowing who the team is behind it, in my mind, just makes it less likely to be a rug, right? It's like they're staking their reputation on showing up and showing who they are. That gives me peace of mind personally when I'm looking at a project. It's like, okay, I know who they are. I respect anonymity, but when it comes to, like the founding team of a project, I think the fact that they show up and show their face to me, it's like, okay, it makes me feel a little bit more at ease about the project personally. And then there's some cases where you kind of need a little bit of identity in it. I'd say with Opolis, right? Like there is a way to do it anonymously, but if you want to get a W-2, if you want to get pay stubs, benefits, there's, certain instances where the information is needed. If you're working on a career in Web3, and you want to get those kinds of things. And it's not for everybody. I'm not going to sit here and assume that it is. It might make sense for some people. It might not for others. For me, I wanted to find an apartment in the San Francisco Bay Area. Now, try doing that without a W-2 and pay stubs. You will get laughed at. So for me, it was necessary, right? So I really think it is up to the individual. And I am a full, like, huge advocate of sovereignty. It's personal choice when it comes to identity. And in some cases, it's not only necessary, but in some cases, it just puts people's minds at ease when it's a big project or a team of a project.
Yeah, two sides to every coin. I just want to, because we're running short on time. There was a question. I don't know, Nicole or Rachel, if you saw it, but Evan, I saw that you responded. There was a question in the chat. What are your thoughts on seamless user onboarding in Web3? And how do you see projects are working towards this? Evan, I know you said we have to meet users where they are, assuming a high level of technical literacy to participate will prohibit us from scaling globally. But Rachel, Nicole, any thoughts there on, as mentioned, seamless user onboarding into Web3 and any projects that you think are actually actively working towards that? Aside from just like every project, but any specific ones?
I mean, when I worked on the Pool Suite release, about a year and a half ago, there were so many things that we couldn't do that were so challenging that we were having to build the tools ourselves. And, I mean, I joke about like the one main experience right now. I don't know which one I did this recently with, but, basically when you go from, it was for Dirt. Yeah. And so the Dirt experience where they recently launched and I was airdropped an NFT because I had supported early on and, went through and verified, et cetera, et cetera. It was so incredibly seamless. It did not even send me to the App Store to, access MetaMask, which is usually what happens. But then I go from the App Store to MetaMask and eventually it works. And so just the fact that we're now being able to sort of like go from place to place and have things connect and work most of the time doesn't feel, it doesn't feel like I'm necessarily selling things. But I think that, we've advanced so far. And I think from the boomer side, sorry, I'm reading the chat, from the consumer side and the boomer side, we're expecting so much more, so I think that, sorry, now I'm just laughing at the chat. Yeah, I think that, eventually these pieces are going to go to the background. We're going to be able to go from, app to app, from experience to experience and not necessarily feel it. But from the builder side, which is what I was going to say, it's also becoming easier. You can have a vision and truly just now put it into practice in a way that even a year ago wasn't possible. And so being able to build something that's a native experience where you're verifying your wallet within that internet website that you're building yourself is something that really wasn't possible. And now, thanks to the tools, we're getting there. Rachel, I see you have your hand raised. Did you want to add to that or was that from last time?
Oh, you know what? I actually just have my hand raised from last time, and I'm still laughing at the chat right now.
No worries. Okay, great. So we have 9 minutes left. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I wanted to leave a little bit of time for just chit chatting, networking without all the questions. We could just, just hang out and say whatever comes to mind. So with that being said, Evin, Nicole, Rachel, once again, I want to thank each of you for taking the time to join the event and allow all of us to pick your brains a bit. It's been truly great getting to know each of you some more. And on behalf of Myosin, I really appreciate all of the insights that you guys have shared. So thank you again. And yeah, that concludes our panel discussion, our Q&A. Feel free to stick around for some casual chatting and networking amongst all of us attendees for the next few minutes.
Julie.
Thanks for having us. We hope you enjoyed this episode of W3G. If you'd like to learn more about Web3 marketing, please visit Myosin.xyz to get started.
And of course, if you're a fan of the show, please be sure to show us your support by subscribing and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever platform you're using to tune in.
Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.